We always enjoy taking a look at this. This is something that our friend Bud Elliott here proposed, and now it's given us a great chance to be able to set some objective angles to very subjective conversations like coach pressure. That let's get in to if Vegas is right with the ACC, starting with, can we get some Noles to go? Can we get some Noles to go? That's right. We're going to start with Florida State, because after going 13-0 in the regular season, everything's gone downhill. I mean, you get blown out in the bowl game. You lose, and you had one good drive, one awesome drive over there in Ireland. And then all of a sudden, all that goes sideways.
We'll
and the whole
season,
we'll always have that drive. Then the whole season ends up sort of going downhill. 2-10. So from 13-1 to 2-10. Mike Norvell cleans house. New offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, more assistant coaches to go along with that as well. Over-under win total at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more, is at 7.5. I mean, Mike Norvell undoubtedly under pressure. But what are the terms of that pressure, and what does 7.5 say about the expectations going into 2025?
So it's interesting. I mean, 7.5 is like one and a quarter wins higher than like what Bill Connolly has them. Like, so that's a pretty, decent difference against what the market has. And I think it probably shows maybe a lack of confidence in some of the teams on this Noles schedule, like both Virginia schools, Wake Forest, some of those type of schools. And I think it shows some belief and expectation that there's like a regression, a positive regression to the mean. Like, a lot of stuff went wrong for them last year. Some of that's probably not fixable. A decent bit is just like flip a coin again. You're probably not going to go 2-10. They've got like a huge buyout here and a lot of capital projects going on. And I really don't think they have any kind of appetite to fire Mike Norvell unless, something crazy happens as far as, the win total. I think if you're within, I think as long as you make a bowl, Norvell's safe for this year. But I do think they're operating in a way that's like, you got to like win every single year type thing. Like, I mean, trading Kromenhoek for Castellanos is really like, if an NFL team did that, we would rake them over the coals, right? It's like that,
because you're sacrificing your future.
That's a young, promising kid, and you're just doing everything you can to not get fired this year. But like long term, that's a terrible trade, right? And you're bringing in an offense that I don't think a lot of really good quarterbacks would want to play in, obviously, for Malzahn. So it's just, hey, we're trying to save our jobs every year and win, and I think they probably will. Probably 6-6 to 9-3, depending on some health stuff. Like, the schedule's fairly top heavy, but I don't think Mike Alford has any appetite to fire Mike Norvell. The one thing here is that now that you have the conference certainty, that probably gives you a little more flexibility as to what you're going to do, because now at least you're not, the lawsuit stuff's gone.
If they don't get 8 wins, you're going to have former players, probably one of them sitting right here, getting a little bit more vocal about the situation in Tallahassee, right? And it does. And the question did include, what does it say about the state of the program? I think that's a part of why people would be upset. Would be like, wait a second, 7 wins is supposed to be a victory lap? Like, no, I get it was 2 wins the year before, but when you go through the schedule and you look through the opponents, there should be 8 wins there at minimum. And I think that should be the standard, but we saw a team get 2 wins last year. We saw players hang up, throw in the towel and quit on Norvell. So but I do agree with Bud that I don't know financially if they have the appetite to make a move, but I do think it does put him squarely in the, okay, if we don't get 8 the following season, then you're done. That type of conversation that comes out. And I do think, I know we really haven't talked about the ramifications of what it means for athletic directors and all these, but I do think then it puts both Mike Norvell and Michael Alford, squarely in the crosshairs of boosters, fan base, alumni, like everyone saying, all right, there's going to have to be, and that would come from the higher up saying, yeah, we need to have this discussion as well.
Do you think Michael Alford gets to make another football hire at FSU? Because I don't. I think if Norvell is gone, he's gone too.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think if this goes south and you have to make a change, you probably do them together.
Then you clean house. I agree.
Yeah.
Just as a fan, forgetting all the buyout stuff, just how you guys would feel. Let's say Florida State goes 8-4, but the 4 losses are Alabama, Miami, Clemson, and Florida, and they're not particularly competitive, any of them. How are you feeling then?
I know.
It's about the expectation because they don't recruit high school worth a damn. Like other staffs outwork them. And I think the other staffs have a lot better personalities in terms of actually like salesmanship.
But and that still matters? Question mark?
Yes, it matters. Of course. Okay. If you don't have good salespeople, you're having to pay top dollar for everybody.
Because
like being the highest bidder cannot be the only reason you land recruits. And I think in large part it is.
Well, thank you for saying that, because I think that there is a mentality among fans that in the modern NIL transfer portal world, all you need is a budget, that you could have robots out there and be able to put it together. But I think that in football, especially, just because of how many players you need to be able to be competitive to win at a high level, you still probably need those traditional recruiting tactics and traditional recruiting skills in a way that might not be the case in basketball or some other sports.
Right. I think the point about the 8 wins is like, who are the 8 if those are losses? I mean, you don't have a single win over a team that any FSU fan cares about.
Right.
But
to your point, Chip, about the highest bidder stuff, and then it's just transactional and you have a bunch of robots, you know what happens when you do that? You have players throwing the towel after you're not, like, you're hired, your job is to make an ACC title and make a postseason run. Once you fall short of that, guess what you do? You start going through the motions because there is no emotional attachment either to the coaching staff or to the school you're playing for. So it's human nature to be like, all right. And then it becomes like the NFL. Just give me my check. I'm out of here in a year anyway.
Yeah, 2024 offseason, the headline was Florida State spending big, Florida State having a transfer portal class that is highly rated, and that same group just did not play out. I mean, like, Bud, I'm not going to ask you to, if you want to keep state secret, but like, do you know what kind of budget Florida State was playing with? Like, if we've now sort of laid it all on the table and we know where Miami and Texas and Ohio State were, at one end of the table, if we know at the other end what like your 4 million, 5 million, sort of the lower end of some of these power conferences, do you know where Florida State fell last year?
Yeah, they weren't in that like top 5 range. I think they were in that like 6 to 15 range.
Okay.
I don't like, they were not at 20 from like best of my knowledge, but
and that's
last year's transfer portal class. I think last year's transfer portal class was weird because they tried to thread the needle of like really high upside guys who weren't proven, but they also needed those guys to play right away because they don't recruit high school at the level you would expect Florida State to. So you got to bring in these transfers and have them play right away. And some of these dudes, like I was talking to people over there and they're like, hey, I don't know why everybody writes off all this transfer class we took. Like some of these guys were not good last year, but they do have some long-term upside. I'm like, well, for the purpose taken, it makes 100% sense to write them off, right? Because you actually needed them to play, but you also needed them to be high upside guys. But like, I guess in theory, they could be right that like the high upside is still potentially unlockable. Now, some of those dudes I got like no hopes for, but maybe some of like they're hyping Earl Little again. Do I buy that? Not really, but I'm open to seeing it. Like they're putting their name on it. So I guess like that's a guy to go watch.
I think the game you want to get, you have to, I don't say have to get, but the game that's gettable is the Miami game at home.
Yeah.
Like that's one that for Florida State fans, it's early enough in the season. If you don't get Bama, you should be 3-1. You've still kind of got momentum. The place should be loud. You've got home field. I think that's one that could kind of determine the, 6 to 9 win range like you're talking about, Bud.
If they get Miami, and then if they go to Gainesville and get Florida,
extension.
I mean, if Florida State is 10-2, do they make the playoff?
With Bama on the schedule, yes.
Yeah, because that means they'd have 2 wins over either Alabama, Clemson, Florida, or.
I'm saying they lose.
What if Bama's 9-3 though?
Yeah, and it does depend on what Florida is. Like if Florida is
6-6, their win totals right around.
Or like 5-7, and they've quit on Billy because they realize he's finally getting fired. Like then 10-2.
I would imagine in a 12-team field, 10-2 is good enough to get them in.
It was funny because if you've been paying attention over at CBSSports.com, over on the college football side, we are still writing things. I know that it can be easy to get just sort of taken over by the March Madness. And our series this week is every single conference. Someone names the 5 teams that are the top contenders for the college football playoff. I had to write the ACC. And boys, it was tough. Do you know how hard it is to find 5 real contenders from the college football playoff from the Atlantic Coast Conference? There's only 4 teams that have win totals higher than 7.5. Like, and we're talking about from the ACC, you've got to be 10-2, 11-1 to be able to have a shot, to be able to be in the mix for an at-large bid. Shout out to you, Garrett. Yes, I do read from time to time, but I included Florida State as my 5th. I was like, okay, so do you want to play the game? Who would your 5 be?
Miami, Clemson, Florida State, SMU.
Bill, 6 rings. 6 rings, Bill Belichick.
Louisville. Not 6 rings, Bill Belichick. I went through and it was basically Clemson, Miami, easy. Louisville, SMU felt like the next tier. And I was just literally looking between teams that all had win totals of 7.5. Which one of these teams actually has the potential? And the one thing that I said for Florida State is like, look, it's that schedule. If they do rise up and take down one of those teams, that's going to be the kind of thing that could help you in a college football playoff conversation. I find it highly unlikely that Florida State goes from 2-10 to 10-2. We really don't see those kind of turnarounds often, but it's also seemed highly unlikely you'd go from 13-1 to 2-10. So that's kind of the fire that you're playing with the Seminoles.